Hi everyone, I'm delighted to be introducing you to the Major Tech Fails podcast series, or should we say, how not to make major tech fails. And this series is sponsored by RiseNow and powered by Procurious. I'm Helen McKenzie, Principal Advisor at Procurious, and with me for every episode of this podcast series is Matt Stewart from RiseNow. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Helen.
Now, Matt, there are a lot of consultants and writers out there producing content relating to tech implementations. And, for us reading it, it's difficult to judge whose credentials are the most reliable. Now, I've had a look at your resume and you certainly look like an expert that we can trust. And you've been operating at a senior level in consulting for some time. You've been involved in over 500 procure-to-pay, source-to-pay evaluations, over 200 implementations, been a top partner of multiple Gartner lead platforms over the course of the last 10 years, and you went from being the president of CPP Global to managing partner and founder of RiseNow. And that's a supply chain management consultancy company that started inside of CPP Global back in 2012. Have I got that all right?
Yes, Helen, that is right. It's been quite the journey and learning experience.
Well, it certainly sounds like it. Now, before we start, I'm curious, why did you want to make this series of podcasts for our listeners, about tech fails?
Well, I was speaking with Procurious founder Tanya Siri, and we both agreed that the internet is littered with content telling people how to make their digital transformation successful. But we didn't see anyone who was willing to take on the elephant in the room, and that elephant being, why do so many projects fail, and what steps can be taken to first avoid failure and then make your project a raving success. So if no one else was going to have that and go into that, I wanted to be the one that started that conversation, because I believe that we can learn from our failures as much or more than the successes. But we first have to be honest with ourselves and each other about the failures that we've experienced. And speaking of failure, there's a stat out there that's always kind of bothered me. All throughout the internet, if you Google it, you'll see Gartner being quoted as saying that up to 67% of ERP projects are failing. And they expect that number to actually climb due to the cloud. And if that's true, then our industry is failing no matter what grading scale you prescribe to. So in response, I believe that we as an industry, system integrators, need to look deep into ourselves and say, that's just not acceptable. And source to pay is one of the core components, if you think about it, of a client's ERP. It touches almost as many end users as human capital management. It also drives the greatest hard dollar cost savings opportunity. So it's imperative that we get this right, especially as organizations that are in desperate need of saving money right now. And this perspective that I share, it comes from many years of seeing success, and even if, I hate to admit it, even some failure. And we've experienced some failure ourselves that we've learned from that have since been used to shape who we are today.
Hang on a minute. You're not saying that things don't always go well, are you? Do you know what? That's really unusual. I don't think I've ever heard a consultancy company admit that a project has failed. I think it's really refreshing that you're sharing with our audience that things don't always go according to plan.
That's right, Helen. You see, back in 2015, we'd implemented over 110 cloud spend management clients over a 5-year span, and we were at what we thought the top of our game. Clients loved us, partners loved us, but then all of a sudden we had a string of several projects that did not go as planned.
Oh my goodness, how on earth did you respond to that?
It's a great question. My team, we could have looked outside of ourselves. We could have cast blame on technology, our clients, or made up a litany of other excuses, but I was really proud of them. They didn't. And instead, we all looked inside of ourselves and focused on what we could control and what part did we play in contributing to those missteps, and what do we have the power to change moving forward. So what we learned through this process of self-reflection transformed our company culture, our projects, and we've not looked back. So this series of podcasts, we're going to get into some detail. We're going to share some of what we learned during this time and have since implemented. And our hope is we can help this industry move that number of 67% to 0 or very close to it, which is what we've seen at RiseNow over the past 5 years.
Okay, you've mentioned that 67% failure rate that you talked to us about earlier. Again, there. Can you explain to our listeners what does that stat mean, and how is failure defined to come up with that stat?
Now, how we define failure is, can be projects not finishing on time, projects going over budget, end users not adopting your tech, suppliers not connecting, missing out on the savings, both hard and soft, that were promised as a part of the business case that got the project approved, just to name a few. But I do want to kind of put an asterisk next to my previous statements. The number of 67% is actually on the initial implementation, which means that many organizations may have failed at first, but then they end up correcting their mistakes. They could engage a firm like us to come in and do project recovery or optimization to realize the value that they'd hoped to realize initially. Now, that's of course if they selected the right platform, which not every organization does, as not all platforms we find are created equal, and some struggle to effectively address all industry requirements and specific organizational type uniquenesses. I say that because I don't want to scare anyone out of not moving forward with these platforms, as when implemented properly, they bring substantial value. These solutions are absolutely needed in an economic climate that we're in right now, as organizations will be looking to supply chain for ways to reduce costs, reduce risk, and increase overall supply chain agility while doing more with less. And the market-leading solutions in this space have demonstrated time and time again that paired with the right people and process, they'll do exactly that.
Okay then, I mean, Matt, you and I have talked previously about how much these project failures impacted on you personally and your organisation, particularly in 2015. Would you mind sharing some of that experience with our audience?
Of course, Helen. Going through that in 2015 gave me a conviction and a belief that there has to be a better way to approach systems implementation, and that this conversation really needed to be had. You see, I believe holding on to our failures and not talking about them openly is a huge problem in our industry. It's so easy to cast blame, look outside of ourselves as the reason for the failure, as the client's fault or different thing, and move forward doing what we have always done while expecting a different result. And I believe that organizations hire consultants because we've been there, we've done that, and we should be protecting our clients through this. And when I go into a new prospective client and I ask for a show of hands of how many have been involved in a failed project, in the past 5 years, almost everyone raises their hands. But when I ask what they've learned from those failures and what they put in place to mitigate that risk going forward, I get mostly blank stares. And I think that's a problem. That's why I believe the number of 67% has remained mostly unchanged over the past 20 years that I've been tracking this. And understand, according to Gartner, cloud ERP is not moving that closer to zero in recent years. It's actually trending the opposite direction. And that's why I thought this conversation was so needed. Why we believe this industry of system integrators is so ripe for disruption. Because no matter what grading scale you use, 67% is a failing grade. And I have to tell you, Helen, if 2 out of 3 projects that we implemented failed at RiseNow, I'd go find another line of work. And I can tell you, so would the rest of my team, because we care too deeply for our clients, as on most projects, they end up becoming lifelong friends. So for us, one project failing is one too many. And I think back to 2015 and what it felt like when we were confronted with the fact that we did not deliver on what we promised. And those clients put their trust in us, and they put their reputation and their careers in our hands. And those were very difficult conversations for us to have, conversations that we vowed to never have again. We went out of our way to make things right by each of them, but we knew that there had to be a better way. And we committed to each other and our clients that we would be relentless in our pursuit to find it. And that pursuit really became our mission. And the more we uncovered, the more we looked into ourselves and our industry, and the more we believed that the industry of software implementation really needed to be disrupted.
So are you talking about disruption, something like Uber or Netflix, Matt?
Maybe not as big as like a Netflix to Blockbuster type disruption or Uber to the taxi cab industry, but who knows? I mean, when you think about it, when you have 67% failure rate and clients that consistently tell me that they're losing faith in big system integrators, as having their best interest in mind, we knew that change needed to happen. And we thought, who better than us to bring it and have this conversation? You see, the way many organizations are buying software and then implementing it, we feel truly needs to change. The technology is getting better and better, but if we don't change how we buy and then implement, we'll not be able to realize the full benefits that we've been promised. So we reshaped our methodology, we reshaped our approach, our company culture, company structure, how and who we hire, and more. So individuals from my team and I will be sharing pieces of what we've learned and what we've implemented in hopes that all of your listeners will never have to experience a failed project again, especially due to the economic climate that we're in right now, as we do not have time for mistakes. And as supply chain is going to be under great pressure to bring savings, reduce risks, and achieve greater efficiencies now. And if this podcast can help even one company get it right the first time and start reaping the benefits of those great solutions faster, so they don't have to do unnecessary layoffs, then I believe all the effort and expense that we've gone to putting in this podcast together would be more than worth it.
And I love that concept of disrupting the industry and not accepting that failure is inevitable. I think that's a really different way of looking at it. And, these are the themes that we're going to be exploring in the series. So thanks for that great message, Matt, and the mission as well. And I'm sure that our listeners will really appreciate you and your team sharing the real world examples over the podcast series and that heartfelt wisdom that you're going to bring to us in the episodes that we're going to be sharing over the next few months, and really to make sure that they don't have any more projects that fail and that they can actually realise the success that they're striving for. So thanks again, Matt, for joining me and giving us an overview of what we've got in store in this podcast series. I'm really looking forward to recording the episodes with you, and also for you and the team being transparent with sharing some of your backgrounds and also your experience with our listeners today. So I'm eager to hear more. I mean, I've seen my share of projects fail over the years. I think there's so much we can learn from these podcasts to help us all improve. So looking forward to seeing you again on the podcast then, Matt.
I am as well, Helen. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so make sure you don't miss any of the podcast series by heading over to www.procurious.com/major-tech-fails to sign up now. And if you go to the Procurious platform, you'll also see a banner with that up for you to easily click on and sign up to. In the meantime, head on over to Procurious.com, and join the conversations that we're having there with our network of thousands of procurement and supply chain professionals, and I'll see you there.